right, we will reconvene public meeting number 148, and we will take out of order item 8D because we have guests here who apparently have a plane to catch. Penn National has also been waiting patiently, and we will get right to them in just a second. All right, Director Wells.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Before you this morning is a petition for an exception of licensing as a gaming vendor primary by JCM American Corporation. They're represented by counsel here this morning. The petition is under our Code of Mass Regulations 134.04 for vendors, and it allows any person by submission of a written petition may request a determination from the Commission that the person providing goods or services deemed by the Bureau to meet a description contained in 205 CMR 134.011A need not be licensed as a gaming vendor primary on the grounds that they are not providing services on a regular or continuing basis, or that they do not directly relate to gaming. So the petitioner is here this morning to describe the nature of their business plan with the Penn National Casino and why they're requesting this exemption under the, this exception under the regulations.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
I'm Laura McAllister Cox with Greenberg Traurig, and to my right is Dean Hendrickson, who is the Territory Manager for JCM Global. We're here today because of a very unique situation. Penn National has approximately 180 slot machines that they have from a different property that they need outfitted to be able to operate at Plainridge Park. The machines are sitting in a warehouse and need the bill validators retrofitted in order to have these machines be on a system consistent with the new machines that will also be coming into the property. JCM pretty much is the industry standard in bill validators in the gaming industry, and they are poised to ship these bill validators to the warehouse, bring in 2 technicians to install them, and have these machines turned around in about a total of 4 days to be ready to go to the property. The timeline on this, however, is very, very critical. This needs to be done by the middle of the month. Right now, this is the only project JCM has involved in gaming in Massachusetts. So this is not a situation for this project where there will be regular and continuing business. And therefore, we are seeking the exception under the flexibility of the regulations that's been provided. I think Dean can explain a little bit about how the process is going to work, if you have any questions.
I'm assuming they're licensed in other jurisdictions just based on the nature of your work?
Yes, JCM is licensed in 200 jurisdictions.
And if there were additional work required, and you would at that time apply for a license, is that, or we don't anticipate additional work?
Well, I think we would welcome additional work and additional opportunity, and at that point, absolutely, the license would be applied for.
What is it that you do in the other 200 jurisdictions where you are licensed? Why are you not doing, why will you not be doing business here?
It would depend on what the property sees as need for future business with us. One of the natures of our product is most of it is delivered in the OEM slot machines up front. We can offer other services if needed. At this point in time, the only business that we've discussed with the Plainridge Park property is the upgrading of the used slot machines that they have.
Did I understand that that work would be done at the warehouse?
Yes.
IEB, have you got a recommendation on this?
It is not an unreasonable request given the limited nature of the business that they're going to conduct and their compressed time frame.
Right?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Attorney Lilios also pointed out the 2 technicians that will be doing the work, they will have temporary licensure, so those technicians will go through the IEB licensing process.
Oh, okay.
That gives us some extra confidence in what's going on.
Oh, all right. And assuming that the exception is just granted for this particular transaction.
Correct.
Right. All right.
Mr. Stebbins? will you-
Sure. Mr. Chair, I would move that the commission approve the petition for exception of licensing as a gaming vendor primary by JCM American Corporation, DBA JCM Global, for the work as stated in the adjoining petition.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You got it.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wall.
Thank you.
All right, now we will go back to our friends from Penn. And Director Griffin.
Chairman Crosby and Commissioners, today I'm joined by Lance George and Michelle Collins, who's the VP of Marketing for Plain Ridge Park Casino. Before I turn the mic over to them, I'd like to give you a brief background. As referenced by the Massachusetts Gaming License Condition 14, Penn National Gaming is required to submit a regional tourism marketing and hospitality plan that is created in consultation with the Regional Tourism Council and with the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism. And the plan is required to be provided to the Commission for its approval at least 3 months prior to the anticipated opening of operation of the gaming establishment. Penn National submitted the marketing plan, which is on the screen here today and in your books, on Friday, March 6th, which satisfies the 3-month requirement given their planned opening on June 24th. This plan is required to have, but not limited to include, making space available in the gaming establishment for the state and regional tourism information, links on the licensee's website to the Regional Tourism Council website, a joint marketing program, and with the Regional Tourism Council and the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, and staff training in regards to the plan. I have had communication with Betsy Wall, the director of the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, and she is satisfied with the plan and has enjoyed working with Michelle Collins from Plain Ridge Park Casino. So I'm going to now turn it over to Lance George.
Sure. Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
As we get started, I do want to thank Director Griffin and Commissioner Stebbins for their guidance on this item. As Jill just mentioned, I've got with me today Michelle Collins, Vice President of Marketing. She'll walk through a few slides here. Good work by Michelle, by Betsy Wall, and a few others I believe Michelle will call out. Certainly appreciate the assistance and the collaboration, and I hope we've hit the mark on this one. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So as Lance stated, one of our requirements was...
Just introduce yourself.
Sure. Michelle Collins, Vice President with Plain Ridge Park Casino. And so what I did is I met with Betsy Wall immediately before I started to put this plan together, and she was able to connect me with all the appropriate people from each of the regions. So from there, my team and I met with these folks, and then we developed this plan. So I will walk you through it. So the objective is to develop relationships between Plain Ridge Park Casino and within the businesses with Massachusetts. We created joint marketing programs that will allow us to capitalize on the existing attractions that are already here in Massachusetts, specifically, you know, the ones that are near Plain Ridge Park Casino, because that's an easy fit. So we've met with Xfinity and with Rentham Outlets to come up with different ways that we can co-partner and co-brand and create an excitement atmosphere and create almost a sense of a vacation for people to get away, even though we don't have an overnight stay. We've also partnered with some of the hotels, and we continue to work on the restaurant side as well. In addition to that, what we've done is we've worked with CMT, which is a tourism kiosk. They provide the kiosk to us, and then it allows us to put the kiosk in our lobby, and then people can come and actually look at what is available in Massachusetts, and it allows us to put what we want on there, so we don't have to put anything that isn't Massachusetts, which is helpful, obviously, because our goal is to keep the revenue in Massachusetts and gain it back from what we've lost, maybe to Rhode Island or to Connecticut. In addition to this, as I already mentioned, Xfinity Center and the Bentham outlets, we're also looking at bus program opportunities. So my team did go to the Focus on Asia to see what kind of opportunities we have there. And then in addition to that, Sunshine Tours and those different facilities that will allow us to figure out what we can do to bring business to the facility, and if people can't actually get there with a vehicle, or if they're coming from out of state, to help promote people coming to visit the area. The primary regions, sorry, I'm kind of jumping around, are obviously Greater Boston, Metro West, Bristol County, Plymouth County, and Central Massachusetts. So those are the regions that we've actually met with to date. If not a formal meeting, then we've had correspondence via email. And we have also started the process to join the chambers in those areas. So we recently found out that they don't have to be licensed through the Gaming Commission, so it makes it easier for us to process the paperwork. So we've started those applications now. As I mentioned, the kiosk already. Another piece to it, obviously, is to educate our staff. So one of the things that we'll do is add this component into our training program, as well as with marketing. Anytime you do a promotion, what we do is we work with each of the departments to educate them on that promotion. And with this, where we'll be co-branding and the cross opportunity for this partnership, we'll include the information of each of these facilities to our employees so that they are aware of what we're offering. That way, if a customer asks, or if we're promoting marquee rewards or wherever it might be, they'll understand what's going on as well, so everybody will be on the same page. For online, we'll obviously post the websites on our website. In addition to that, we've already added a page to Mass Vacation for Plainridge Park Casino, and we'll do cross promotions with Facebook, social media, Twitter, all of that. As I already mentioned, we will collaborate with different and various businesses. And in addition to the ones I've already mentioned, there's also opportunity with the camping facilities. And in addition to that, we could look into shuttle buses and that sort of thing, so that we can, like I said before, we can actually make it a staycation for people if we provide the transportation and then the cross opportunity. So, you know, a perfect example will be if you're a camper and it's a rainy day, then they would offer to their customers that, you know, there could be a day trip to Plainridge Park Casino. So, you know, overall, our main goal is to partner with what is available to us in the Commonwealth. And one of the other items is our Marquee Rewards program, which I know has been mentioned today a couple different times. And really, that's our loyalty card. And this allows us to partner with these different businesses, and they can cross-promote as well. So an example of that would be if you earn points at our facility, you could redeem them at one of their facilities. So in essence, we're giving business to our local partners and other businesses in the area, so that everybody's benefiting from this addition of gaming to the Commonwealth.
Sounds great. Questions? Comments?
I see you mentioned seniors. Are you planning bus trips from the senior centers and whatnot?
Yes.
Others?
Without getting into any competitive details, or maybe you don't have some of these partnerships are all ironed out, but help me understand, some of the bus partnerships or the campground partnerships. I suppose there's a number of ways in which you can partner, but
Typically, the way that it works is you would get with the bus company or the campground, and you would develop a program that would incent the customers to come to either facility. So for a bus program, for example, typically if there's a certain amount of people on that bus, then you're able to offer an incentive that would either be a food offer or a free play offer, and the bus actually comes to the facility during a specific time frame, and then the bus driver actually waits, and they play for 3 or 4 hours, and then it's just a day trip. With Rent Them Outlets, what we've discussed is obviously they have a lot of bus tours that go in there, so we would piggyback off of what they're doing and add a component for Plainridge Park Casino as well. So you could go shop and then come to the casino to play.
One of the things that we came across when we were doing the RFA2 evaluation was, and I think Betsy Wall pointed this out, is that Rentham gets a lot of bus traffic from international visitors who come into the Port of Boston and immediately see the word outlet and want to hop on a bus and drive down to Rentham. So I'm glad to see you're making that connection. I think it's important. Another component of the RFA2 application, which I'm glad to see you hit on, was the stay, play, and shop. And you had, as I remember in the application, you had well over a few hundred maybe MOUs that were signed with all those potential partners. What, Michelle, are you doing to kind of follow up with all those people that had signed on or are hoping for some type of agreement?
We're on number 25.
Okay.
So we have a list, and we're going through it, and between my team and myself, we're meeting with each of these companies or businesses to identify different ways that we can promote each other. So an example would be, like I mentioned, Holiday Inn is one of them that we had discussed. So what it would be is allow our customers to use their reward points to stay there. So again, it's the stay, play, vacation type. So that there's, obviously we don't have a hotel, but the plan would be we would try and provide transportation to and from the hotel so that they could come, but then again, they can use their comps that they're earning at our facility for the hotel.
Okay. You touch on it a couple of times in the presentation, but I would encourage you. Encourage you only because for the next 2 years, you guys are going to be the lone gaming operation in Massachusetts. And your proximity to Boston, I think, allows you an opportunity to tap into that international market. So I just encourage you to stay in touch with Betsy and strategize and be involved in any of the, international marketing opportunities that are going on at the same time. There's a huge increase in the number of direct international flights into Logan. You're not that far from Boston. There's some opportunities, I think, in, the next 2-year window or so where you can really take advantage of the international visitorship, not just to the Boston area, but to Massachusetts overall.
Agreed.
Agree.
Good job. One of your, the big pitches in the RFA, too, was this idea of collaborating with Patriot Place and Xfinity and so forth, the 4 big Rentham and so forth. And I didn't understand exactly what those deals might look like. So, but you referred to it again here. So what is the nature of that relationship?
So for Rent Them Outlet, for example, one of the incentives that we've agreed upon is they have this VIP pass that you can use to go shopping, obviously, at their various outlets where you get a discount. So they've worked with us and agreed that if somebody has a Marquee Rewards card and presents that to them at their facility, they'll get the VIP pass. So again, we can promote Rent Them Outlets on our local benefits for the program, and they get the benefit of having additional business from the customers we're getting. Xfinity Center, same type of idea, only, you know, we're doing a, most likely a partnership with them where obviously we would get tickets to promote on our website, but in addition to that, they're looking into giving us a code where we could allow our customers to get a discount on tickets prior to them, you know, when they're on sale for a certain window of time.
Yeah, so we're in the home stretch of wrapping up a 2-year sponsorship with the Xfinity Center right now. So we'll have 40-plus tickets per concert, advertising space there, an area that is dedicated for our customers. So we should be able to wrap that up in the next couple of weeks.
Patriots Place, any relationships there?
I have been emailing with Michael Flynn. We have not actually met up yet, but we are in getting prepared to talk.
And I did meet with Michael Flynn early on. Challenging, though, is he's a huge Patriots fan, but I'm willing to work with him despite that.
You may want to keep your affiliation low-key.
Secret?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to work on that, and I think we can work through that with Michael. But yes, we have met with Michael Flynn as well.
As long as you're not a Jets fan.
You know, one
We're
of
good.
the packages around football tickets plus weekend, you know, those are very, very common, I know, for folks from here to go to other cities and see a game and, you know, have a weekend experience somewhere, so that.
Agree, and we do have, and again, this is painful, we have Red Sox tickets
Oh, you do?
already secured. We've got
Excellent.
an opening day and weekend package already.
Great.
We won't embarrass you by asking you who you root for.
Don't worry about it. We can talk offline.
What, so you're vice president local, right? Are you from corporate, or what's your
No,
background?
marketing at Plainville, yep.
And what were you doing before that? What's your
I was
background?
at our Hollywood property in Bangor, Maine.
Oh, okay. Other questions?
At home stretch, yeah, it's exciting. You know, a lot of this starts to
Starts to
take
Coming alive,
place,
yeah.
and these MOUs, you know, you're in the groundwork on the trenches, and it's exciting to get an update on.
Yeah, and
all this.
everybody's been fabulous to work with. They're all very excited about the opportunity, so it makes it a lot easier on us as
No
well.
doubt, no doubt.
Great.
83 days. 83, just an
But
FYI.
who's counting, right?
Correct.
That's great.
Do we have a motion? I think we need to accept this.
Do you need a vote?
Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I ask that the commission approve the marketing and hospitality plan as presented by Plainridge Park Casino.
Second?
Second?
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very
you.
much.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director John Glennon, our Chief Information Officer.
Good afternoon.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
So I'm here to give you an update on the Gaming Technology Laboratory. First item is we are bringing in finalists for interviews. One will be in tomorrow to meet with Executive Director Day, Mr. Van, Director Wells, Director Lennon, and we're hopeful that this candidate is going to be the one, but I don't want to create
This is
any
the lab
expectations.
director?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, so we've been, you know, we posted this position over a year ago. I think we've had at least 2 rounds of people that, we had applicants, and for one reason or another, they didn't work out. I think we have a well-qualified candidate in the person that's coming in tomorrow, so.
Great.
To be continued.
As a practical matter, is it that without that person, we basically haven't been able to do anything on this?
No, not at all. I mean, I think I basically am just filling in and doing the role in terms of supporting the necessary things to comply with our regulations around the governance of electronic gaming devices and.
Well, I meant about the lab itself. I meant,
No, actually, we've designed the lab, and I think we're gonna, we're moving forward on the things that we need to do in order to build the infrastructure. And also, we're talking with GLI and BMM and GTEC about how we're going to use the lab. I'm prepared to talk in a little bit more detail about that in terms of the operating model. The operating model that's in the packet, I'm going to go back and forth. Amy, if you could just go to the next chart. This hasn't changed too much since we looked at this last year. I think I've tweaked a little bit up in the corner of the things that the lab is going to do, but primarily it's ensuring compliance with our regulations, overseeing the relationships with the labs that you just certified several weeks ago, doing interoperability testing, and it's a secondary process, right? So we have technical standards to which these machines need to comply, but they also need to work with the central management system. So there's some secondary testing that will be done in conjunction with the GTEC staff that will be located at our headquarters to make sure that the machines that are coming in are going to plug and play well with both the house management system, ACSC, and the rest of the gaming floor. So that's a secondary testing process. In addition, I think the lab manager and the technicians will be a second-tier support for both the state police and the gaming enforcement unit agents under Bruce Ban and Burt Kane for the technical piece. And at least for the first several months, we're going to be doing things in a manual way. So I think we're all going to be doing kind of the old school validation of the machine. So that's going to be a good learning experience for everybody. It's going to be at least several months. I think we had talked about the GTEC implementation date. The first pass was the end of August, but because of Plain Ridge's schedule and not wanting to interfere with it, that's probably going to slip a little bit from into the fall to go live with the GTEC. So, I mean, I'll entertain questions on the model about what we're going to be doing there. Amy, you may want to go to the next slide, which is just a representation of the physical space for the gaming lab. To the right is the Network Operations Center, where 4 staff will, in a 7x24, 24x7 operation, watch the central management system and the operation of the gaming floor. And the lab basically will house about 20 to 25 slot machines, and those are represented by the 4x4 boxes on there, as well as there's some server racks to accommodate server-based gaming, testing the GTEC system, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the physical space that's on the diagrams that have been finalized for the construction of our space on 12 and 13 at 101 Federal.
Will we have a copy of every game that's out on every floor in this lab?
I think we'll have samplings of the platforms that are necessary to do the interoperability testing. I'm not sure if we're going to have every single instance. I mean, they're of every game. I would say that's probably not going to be the case.
So that if there's a problem with so we're going to rely, I think this is what I heard the last time, we're going to rely on the independent testing labs for problems that show up with games that we don't have copies of.
Yes. And the technicians for the property.
No, I understand that, right, but if we had to do some stress testing on a game to try and replicate some problem, we'd have to use the ITL for that.
Yes, we would.
Okay.
Jim, help me understand the interoperability testing a little more. Does it happen in real time? Are you monitoring
So the interoperability testing would essentially be, you would have a test environment in software development called QA that isn't the production floor, and you would just make sure that the device, the electronic gaming device, operated well with the intelligent central management system as well as the ACSC house system. So it's really does it plug and play well in the production environment? That's the kind of interoperability. It's kind of a final test. I mean, in most cases, these configurations are not different than in other jurisdictions. So if everything is optimal, they should work. But the testing is necessary just to make sure.
So will we be able to do an interoperability testing before the opening day? Obviously not, right? So then,
So we will be because GTEC has a lab already.
okay,
And we are working with GTEC to provide them an inventory of all of the machines that are going to be on the floor. We already know this from Penn's opening plan. So there will be interoperability testing, and then we will be testing, again, in the old-fashioned way, the software on each platform as the gaming floor is validated. We go through that exercise.
so after the initial testing and when, when GTEC comes online with the CMS, what does that interoperability testing look like,
So it will be
in
done.
a year from now?
It will be done on machines at the commission's headquarters in most instances.
Okay.
So those platforms, even though they'll be able to support every game and every instance, I believe, that's running in the casinos. And in the instance that there isn't, again, GTEC has their own lab where they will most likely be maintaining a version of Intelligent that is similar to ours, and they already have, I believe, ACS running in their lab. So
What's intelligent? What is intelligent?
Intelligent is the brand name of the GTEC central management system.
There's obvious collaboration with, and you allude to this here, with the accounting, finance and accounting for all our revenue, validations, as well as the IEB, which is obviously not represented here, but I'd be curious at a later time to understand how you are all working together.
So, I mean, at least my view, and Derek isn't here to have that conversation, but I think we share it, is that there will be administrative access for IEB and for staff in the financial audit and forensic investigation unit into CMS to be able to get access to the information. And I think that that's part of the plan. We can certainly talk more offline. You and Derek and I can sit down. But I think it's not access to the system by our staff, I think, is expected, and I think we'll have subject matter experts that are in both of those areas that will know how to use the central management system to get information related to investigations, etc.
And these 4 people in the NOC, they're accessing the CMS, right? They're going to be sitting there monitoring the CMS.
That's correct. And they're actually, GTEC will be providing a staff of between 6 and 7 people during normal business hours, and then an overnight shift of a supervisor and 2 operators. So there'll be some lab personnel. Okay, this is in the GTEC. I had sent you the GTEC opening or their initial project plan, and in the contract, they're staffing not only the operations, but there's a manager, there's a field technician who will be working on the property to make basically providing technical service. There's a quality analyst which will be working on the interoperability testing, because that is on us to provide the facilities, but GTEC to provide the services for that interoperability.
Does that level of manpower taper down a little bit once there's a...
I don't believe so. I believe that the 13 people, which include the 7 during regular business hours and then 24/7, the other 2 shifts, is consistent throughout the contract unless we choose to take over the operation, and that's provided for as well in the GTEC contract.
I can't wait to understand some of the details as to why a lot of those bodies are required, given that the system is so automated. But we'll get to that part.
Okay.
Me too, I agree.
Where will those personnel be housed? So 6 or 7?
So can you go back to the diagram? So 4 of them in the NOC, and then we do have space in the gaming lab for a workstation or 2. That would just mean, putting space in and having less machines rather than the 23. And then there are 3 cubes in the diagram around the IT area that are hoteling and spare cubes, so we would put the overflow in. And of the 7, one of them is a field tech that probably will be only hoteling. They'll mostly be on the properties, either at Plain Ridge or the commercials once they open.
And an office for the lab manager is outside somewhere?
Yes, in the plan, there's an office accommodation for the gaming lab manager.
Okay.
All right.
So, go back to the first slide, Amy. I'm sorry to make you jump all around. So I think, we're doing some things, I would call them workarounds or kind of consolidated processes to ensure compliance. We're working with the labs, we're working with Penn to make sure that all of the devices are properly tested. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I think in the end state, we'll have a business process which will run smoothly for permitting and registering assets. We're kind of working that through. And to that end, I would say a month or so ago, I shared business processes with you from the lab. We've gotten some good feedback on those, and we're actually looking at our regulations to make some tweaks based on feedback that we've heard from the industry, the manufacturers, on how we were requiring the certification, permitting, and asset registration process. I think there's maybe some disconnects between what are in the regulations and how we can operationalize them. So I guess what I'm saying is the business processes I should be able to bring back to you in several weeks to a month, along with some minor tweaks to the registrations, the regulations.
Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
General Counsel Blue.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You have in your packet today a proposed record retention policy. This is about the 4th, I think, out of 5 pieces of what would be an overall document management policy for the Commission. So if you recall, we've had policies on the definition of what are official records. We have a redaction policy. We have a policy on removal of information from our website. This is the policy that would put in place the types of schedules, how long we'll keep documents, which can be destroyed, which cannot, some definitions as to what some of the retention schedules mean. And what I would be asking the Commission to do today is approve the taking of this policy to the state archivist. In general, what the Commonwealth has is a records retention policy. It has schedules for various agencies. We do not have our own schedule. We can, if we like. The process would be to draft what I have, and it's an attachment at the very end of this policy. We would take it to the state archivist. He would take it to the committee that handles record retention schedules. They would review it, and if they're comfortable with it, they would approve it. Once it's approved, it goes into the overall Commonwealth schedule. So this is what I put together. It is based upon record periods that are in the record retention policy for the Commonwealth for other departments, for similar types of documents. The goal was to make it as clear and concise as possible. Having this reviewed and approved will take some time, so we'd like to start this process now while we work with our IT folks to implement this process in both our electronic document storage, which we're working on, as well as what limited paper storage we have now, because we're actually very good at keeping things electronically. So if there are any questions?
Questions? Is this referring to all emails?
Yes.
So, all emails would be maintained for 6 years.
Yes.
And is that something that other people are doing?
Under the Commonwealth policy in general, they retain them for a much shorter period of time. So we would be keeping them longer than most other Commonwealth agencies. And the other thing to keep in mind with record retention too, and as we get this set up and it's more of an electronic process, there may be some things that an individual creator of a document wishes to keep for longer. These are just the minimum periods of time that you have to keep it. You could keep things longer if you wanted to. We would, we're going to do some training around this, so we would advise against that in some situations. But these are the minimum periods of time. And that, for email, is longer than what the Commonwealth in general does with email.
And why are we doing it longer?
Because there's a conflict when you look at the Commonwealth policy between emails and documents. And if you look at the way information is sent and shared today, what you'll see is many, many documents are shared by email. And in some places, email replaces certain documents. So back, years ago, when we all wrote memos to each other, oftentimes the same information is in an email. So in my view, those two kinds of schedules should be the same. And that's what I did in our schedule. I know that the Commonwealth is looking overall at their schedule and maybe making some changes in their timeframes as well. But this would allow us to have a policy where the attachments to the emails and the emails themselves would have similar periods of times that they were kept.
So when we delete something, you're talking about saving what? Some kind of hard drive that is not in that we don't have access to. It's
No.
It would be, eventually it will be in our document management system. We'll have an overall document management system for electronic documents it's all kept in one place. That's the Documentum system that we bought, but we have to tweak that and get that set up.
Yeah, I don't really have any way to make a judgment about this. Seems keeping all of our emails for 6 years seems like an incredible amount of stuff. And I'm not quite sure why, what the public policy.
It's really hard to segregate the emails that have documents attached and the emails that don't have documents attached. And if an email has a document attached, then under the statewide policy, it's typically kept for 6 years. So we could adopt a policy under which emails were kept for 3 years, but then at the end of 3 years, if we flushed them, we might be flushing documents that everybody else kept for 6 years. So the default is to avoid doing that, keep everything for longer. It's all stored electronically. It'll be purged electronically. You'll never see it. And data storage now is relatively inexpensive, so that you can do this with a minimum of effort. When you hit it you can set things up so when you hit the delete box, it comes off your active screen, goes into the deleted items, but it doesn't get flushed for the 6-year period. So it's an automated process. You never see it. But if you need to get that document within the 6-year time frame, you've got it.
And all of these retained documents are, with a handful of exceptions, are susceptible to public records requests.
Yes, they are.
Hence the retentions, clear guidelines.
Right. Okay. These make sense to you, I gather, from what you're...
It does, yeah. And I think these categories are clear. They're self-identifying. The Documentum system will be set up to automate this process. The idea will be to move forward. It may take us a little while to get there, but to move forward to an electronic storage system so that we're not keeping paper. That'll make the documents accessible to everybody who has clearance to certain privileges to get into places where documents are stored, make FOIA searches easier, make it easier to hold documents when litigation comes up. That's about a 6-month to 8-month process, but we're going to begin doing that soon, if I understand correctly, through the Documentum system that we have that's capable of doing that. So this is really a first step toward moving forward to get that storage process standardized, so we can take that into account as we're designing the documents management system.
Okay. Do we need action from?
Yes, if you would approve my taking this to the Secretary of the Commonwealth to start the approval process, that would be very helpful.
Commissioner McHugh?
I move that we accept and authorize the General Counsel to send to the appropriate Secretariat for approval the document retention protocol embodied in the materials contained in today's packet.
Second?
Second.
Other discussion? What is the B12 Massachusetts game? What does that refer to?
So the schedule is numbered A, B, C, depending on the agency. When I talked to the state archivist, his comment to me was, well, I think you belong in the B section. The last section was B11, so I made this B12.
Got it.
What is a seal? What does a contract under seal mean?
Contract under seal, it says when it's signed, this contract is signed under seal. Under statute, you have to keep it for 20 years. A lot of the Commonwealth contracts are, in particular, land contracts are, but a lot of the Commonwealth contracts are. So we'll take a look at ours and figure out where ours generally fall.
It's an artifact of a bygone era. There used to be contracts that had the seal like the, actually, they were pretty good seals. They had big ribbons,
Yeah,
big
they had
red
ribbons
things, and they were
and
dripping.
colors. and-
We could, I suppose, reinstall that. And,
We
you know, it's
could.
great. Different colored ribbons.
You may be dating
Melt the
yourself.
wax.
Melt the wax and put a thing on it. King put his thing on it, and but now we just say contract under seal. It's kind of mundane. It's not as much fun.
Not as pretty.
All right, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, Commissioners, as our next topic's coming up, some of the good news, though, is the regulations that you see today are the last two packages we plan to bring forward that you will need before we move the slot, get the slot bar open. So we're getting toward the, at least the initial end.
Director Wells.
Good afternoon again. The first item under the Section 8, the Investigation and Enforcement Division report, the exclusion list regulations, looking to begin the formal process. And we have Bruce Band, the Gaming Agents Division Chief, and Todd Grossman, the Deputy General Counsel, to address that.
Gentlemen,
Good afternoon.
Alphonse and Gaston.
Fight over the microphone.
No, we have plenty of microphones. You have before you what we would, I guess, colloquially refer to as the involuntary exclusion list, to be distinguished from the voluntary self-exclusion list that Mr. Van der Linden discussed earlier. There's also a third category of exclusion that's important just to bear in mind, and it all falls under Section 45 of Chapter 23K, and that is a court-ordered exclusion from casinos, which we touch upon in here. Thank you. So this is, again, all under Section 45 for the involuntary exclusion list. I'm happy to address any questions, but we can go through quickly, just laying out how the process will work. It's all basically gleaned from the statute, and then we expounded upon a number of different areas. The bulk of it comes in Section 152.03, which is on the bottom of the screen, where we lay out all of the criteria for which an individual could be placed on the list. These primarily come from the statute itself. The fifth one on the list provides for the exclusion for someone where there exists a potential of injurious threat to the interests of the Commonwealth, if that individual is permitted in a gaming establishment. And on that one, we explained a number of factors that the Commission could look at to determine whether someone is in fact an injurious threat to the Commonwealth, including individuals who are known cheats and folks of that nature. We then talk about, in Section 04, the process that will be followed. Essentially, it's commenced with an investigation by the IEB, which can be initiated by the IEB itself, by the Commission, or by a gaming licensee. The IEB would then investigate the individual, prepare a report, and forward it to the commission for action if it finds that that individual would meet one of the criteria above. Commission at a public meeting would review the report and make a determination as to whether the criteria is met. You would then order the person placed on the list. It's important just to note that the statute doesn't require a hearing where the individual is provided notice prior to the commission reviewing the matter. So we wrote in here that you can provide the individual with notice and grant them a full hearing, but the statute only requires that you give the person a hearing after the fact, after you've decided to place the individual on the list. And then it would be a regular hearing as you've conducted in the past, where we provide the individual with notice and they have an opportunity to explain why they don't believe they meet the criteria. We go through all the notice provisions and how an individual would go about requesting a hearing here in paragraph 3 on page 3 here. Provision number 4, towards the bottom of page 3, we add in that district court order whereby an immediate family member of an individual would have petitioned the court to have that person essentially declared a problem gambler, placed on the list. They would then send notice to the commission. We would place them on the list. We go through in section 06 the information that will be in each individual's profile, if you will. It would be our intent to place all of these profiles on our website and to ensure that each casino has full access to the entire list, hopefully through our database, so they would be able to access it as they do the credit suspension list and the voluntary self-exclusion list. We go through the duties of the gaming licensees, primarily that once they identify an individual on the list, that they exclude the person from the casino. I apologize, I realized after the fact that we left one duty out here, and that is that the casino not be allowed to market to or deny access to complimentaries, check cashing, or their club programs to anyone who is on the list as well. So I just ask that we add that on here. We then go through the process by where an individual can ask that their name be removed from the list after the passage of 5 years from this process.
Is the 5 years statutory?
No, there's no magic to that number at all. That is just a number. It was based on the New Jersey provision where they have a 5-year and a 10-year exclusion, so we picked that as just a round number.
Bruce, is there any other best practice or reason? It seems a little long to me for not even being able to apply. It doesn't mean you can get off the list. It just means you have an opportunity to bring your case forward. Is there any other reason to pick a number?
No, I don't think so. I think it was to stop people from just inundating the system with, requests to come off the list. If they were, concerned enough to put them on the list, I think the 5-year provision was, let's see how you rehabilitate yourself in that time period.
Right. Do other people have a reaction to that?
Well, remember, they would have been placed on the list and then have an opportunity to have that hearing, right?
As to whether they would be on the list, right?
No, to appeal the decision. They get placed on the list.
Right.
Then they appeal, present, they have the opportunity to be heard, and they can either be removed or reaffirmed on that list, and then it's 5 years.
Mr. Ban, do you know if that is an industry standard, or you're just familiar with New Jersey?
No, I don't. I just taken it from New Jersey statute, mostly because that's been tested quite a bit in court and has held up.
I don't know. Does anybody else have? I mean, it might be worth looking around and see what else there is. I mean, there's some of them are less, if the individual is an associate of an individual who falls into one of the first 3 categories, you know, that's your guilt by association, that's fairly far removed. And then if 2-3 years go by, should you be able to at least ask for the right to get back in? I don't know.
Well, you're making the case for placing them or not, right? I mean, I guess.
No, I'm not.
But, no, but it would be at the discretion of this commission to place them.
Correct.
So, if it's a case-by-case basis, almost by definition, you know, until you see what categories the IAB is recommending somebody be placed on, you could make a decision whether they should or not.
I understand that, but once they're on it, how long should they have to be on it before they get a
Okay.
chance to come off it? That's a very different question.
Okay.
Do you guys have any particular experience or insights on this?
We are familiar again with the New Jersey and some other systems. Typically, it is approximately 5 years as a general standard.
It is.
But there are circumstances where agencies do allow people to petition early on good cause shown and waive the 5-year period. So if again, Mr. Band is right that you don't want to have people inundating you constantly for replacement or removal from the list. But on the other hand, there might be extraordinary cases where people can show good cause for something less than the 5 years, and I know of cases where agencies have waived the 5-year period.
So are you recommending a clause that we add to this that would allow for a waiver?
Well, yeah, we could do it that way, and Bob reminds me too that if there is a waiver, it would only be a one-time request. You can't keep coming back every year asking for that extraordinary relief. So a one-time request for an extraordinary situation waiver of the 5 years.
Would that satisfy your?
Sure. I mean, I don't have a strong feeling on this. It just intuitively strikes me as a long time with no flexibility. I think the idea of having some flexibility seems kind of fair to me, but I'm not wedded particularly to it. But if that were suitable in your eyes, Commissioner Cameron, then I would certainly find that a good addition.
We do have of course, a general variance provision in the regulations that allow you to grant a variance from any regulation for essentially good cause. There are a number of factors you'll recall. So unless you think it's going to be a repeated type request, if you think a large percentage of people on the list are going to come back for early consideration, then we should write it into the rule. But if it's going to be more the exception, then we do have a variance provision that would allow you to grant that type of relief.
Does that variance provision limit it to one request?
No.
Because that's a point that would need to be added, so maybe it does need to be made specific in this case.
My read, and this is just a gut feeling like yours, Mr. Chairman, but on the other side is that in order to get on the list, there's a really it's a high bar to get on this list. It's really something injurious, some real undesirable. It comes after cases here that are, pretty offensive, if you will. So the 5 years strikes me as reasonable, but it's only a matter of.
Well, I think the five years does too, and it sounds like it is an industry standard. But as Mr. Michael said, it would be for kind of an extraordinary situation, and it would just be the ability to have a one-time waiver. So I would have no reason, or I don't see a reason not to include that as part of this, just for that particular extraordinary situation.
Yes, if I may, guy I routinely handle these, and on occasion, you get a case and to address Commissioner Zuniga's concern. It is a high bar. We want it to be high. But there are occasions, for example, advancement in technology, DNA testing.
That's what I was thinking. That's the example I was thinking of.
Later on, it's exonerated. You need someone to may occur within that period.
Right.
There are those extraordinary cases.
Somebody recants testimony or something. I mean, I think that's, there's not much, if you write it fairly, strictly, but it would give us the opportunity to reconsider under extraordinary circumstances. Commissioner Stebbins, are you all right with that?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You're all right with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The next section is the forfeiture section. The statute provides, and I'm on the top of page 5, that an individual who is on the list shall not collect any winnings or recover losses arising as a result of prohibited gaming in the gaming establishment, and that the losses shall be the winnings shall be forfeited to the commission, deposited in the gaming revenue fund. We then just go on to explain a little bit more about how that process will work. We point out, as we did in the voluntary self-exclusion list, that the casino should, where only possible and lawfully, take the proceedings back and not engage in any, a process that would violate anyone's, constitutional rights or anything like that. That they take the winnings back, they cash them in, and then they send them to the commission. We have a paragraph in here, paragraph 3, that would allow a person to challenge the forfeited winnings in the event that some of the chips or other items of value were not actual winnings. They were just money that the person had in their hand or something of that nature. They could come before the commission and argue that those monies should not be forfeited. So that's the forfeiture section. And finally, we have paragraph 10, which talks about the presence of elected officials of a host community gambling in a gaming establishment. And you'll recall that this was an issue that you discussed a couple of years back, actually, before we had embarked upon any of these types of regulations. And the initial decision was to come up with a regulation that would prohibit elected officials from host communities from gambling in the casino in their host community. So this is where this regulation would seem to neatly fit, and this is, I think, what it would look like. But we certainly wanted to draw your attention to.
Comments? How do others feel about the elected official?
I do remember the discussion we had almost 2.5 years ago. These were part of the policy discussions. Actually, Bobby and Guy identified that this was a particular area that the statute was silent, and we ought to think about, because especially in the context of the exclusion list or other jurisdictions. I think there's an appearance more than anything else topic to consider here, and it's that appearance that I think we need to be careful, and where the host community public official gambling at that facility could be interpreted as something going on. I don't know.
Yeah. Commissioner Stebbins, as a former municipal official, what's your thought about that?
Wow. Well, I do remember the extensive discussion we had about it. I think it's worthwhile to keep in there. I think it kind of, eliminates any problems with perception. And to a degree, I think it probably answers a question for a lot of local officials who are trying to figure out what the parameters are when a facility opens, what they can and cannot do when they go into a facility that they've essentially are a signatory to a host agreement on, or have approved some zoning or licensing decision. I think this gives them a clear direction as to what they can and cannot do.
I think it's a good provision as well.
Yeah.
It's, it is an appearance, as well as there have been instances that it's more than an appearance, so I
Right.
think it's a good, it's a good piece of this for us to keep in.
I mean, it certainly seems to me like good public policy. The only question in my mind, and it's only vague, is whether it should be we who impose it, or, with all the deference in the law to local control, should it be up to the host community to pass those rules, or is this the higher order of our overall responsibility to protect the appearance of integrity for the audience? And, I could sort of go either way, but if the consensus is that this is an appropriate thing for us to do, I'm comfortable with that.
Is this the final version of this, or are we just putting this
This
out?
is the first draft.
Yeah.
This
so-
is, yeah, it's the first
so-
draft. We'd ask when.
Right, so we
you
can
know,
get
we're ready
comments
to-
on this. I think we should leave it this way and see what comments we get.
Okay. Well, so it's maybe try to, somebody remind Ombudsman Ziemba to ask around too.
We already got an inquiry around that case.
Okay.
As we speak.
Good.
We
Would-
did.
Yes.
From an elected official?
Not exactly.
Would this be, would these people, if this were adopted, be on the excluded list?
No, I don't think so. It would just be a rule, essentially.
No, it says they
It
can
says
go into
they
the.
can go in.
Yes.
Can go in.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because there'll
They
be,
just cannot place a wager.
Yeah,
there'll
right,
be
right,
meetings and
Right, okay.
retirement dinners and other
Right.
events that they will be able to attend.
right. Okay.
I think just to clarify, my understanding is we were requesting this begin the formal process. I don't think we've done an informal. We
Correct.
wanted to move this along, but there would still be an opportunity for
Right.
comment.
Right. Okay, anything else?
Yeah. Well, if you're inclined to do so, we would ask that you move this, or approve this for movement through the promulgation process, and then we do have one other point on this topic.
Should we have our vote first?
Yeah, if we can.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we initiate the formal promulgation process for 205 CMR 152, individuals excluded from a gaming establishment.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
With that, Section 45 of Chapter 23K and Paragraph K at the very end says that the Commission shall pursue an interstate compact for the purposes of sharing information regarding the excluded persons list. So we need to start thinking about taking some action towards working with other states towards sharing this information, using people on their list, letting them gain access to our information.
We've had the first meeting of a New England consortium where we've put that on the table with other states. And maybe, Rick, if you could make a note to make sure that we follow up with Mass Council and with Mark. But it is in the pipeline as an idea.
Is that compact?
However, forgotten that it was a mandate.
Well, is that compact for the exclusion list or the self-exclusion list,
It's
or
for
both? We have had those conversations for the self-exclusion
Yeah, you're
list.
right, it wasn't about the exclusion list, but yeah, but we'll expand.
But if it's for both, we'll
Right,
expand it.
right. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next on the agenda, the internal controls, CMR 138, with the same team, Attorney Grossman and Assistant Director Band.
Do we need a break before we get into this, or is everybody okay to go ahead? Okay, go ahead.
Well, this today is the culmination of a long process in which we've brought these before you on a couple of occasions. They've been circulated for public comment for quite some time, and in fact, we've received a lot of public comment from a number of different entities that bear mentioning at the moment. And we're thankful to everyone for participating and collaborating with us on these regulations. They've caused us to really think through and consider and reconsider a number of important points here that go towards the control of the casino. So what we are able to present to you here today is our best judgment as to the best way to go about doing this. So we got comments from all of the licensees, and we're thankful to all of them for taking the time to do this. And we got extensive comments from the Office of the Attorney General. And we're, of course, appreciative to them for taking the time to go through our drafts and sit down with us and really think through some of the intricacies of what we are proposing here. And we've also received comments from a number of other sources, including the UAW, and a lot of proposals and comments and recommendations have been incorporated in here. some in the exact manner requested, others in some way, shape, or form reflecting the principles that were being requested. So again, though, this document here just reflects our best judgment as to the best way to go about doing this. And with that, we can go through what we believe some of the highlights to be. Obviously, if there are points of interest, we should pause there and go through some of that. All of the red language in here reflects changes from the initial version that you approved to put through the promulgation process. You'll recall we've had a public hearing on these regulations, so at this point, whether today or in the very near future, these are ready to be approved for adoption.
All right, so you're going to walk through it, hit the highlights. Let's just go through in sequence, and if we've got questions along the way.
Yes, I think that's probably the best way to do this. Why don't we just start on page 8? I'll just talk about the language that's in red when I start talking about things. That's what I'm talking about on the page. So here we beefed up this section to talk about the operations certificate, and just clarify, this will be in conjunction with the operations certificate regs that you'll have coming before you again shortly, that all of these internal controls have to be in place and operational before an operations certificate is issued. So we wanted to tighten that up, and that's reflected right there. On page 9 at the bottom, we're on paragraph 6, and this section discusses the variance provision that pertains solely to the internal controls regulations. And we've received a number of public comments on this section, and as you can see, we've made a number of adjustments as well. And ultimately, what we have here is a procedure by which the executive director, through the commission, could receive requests from the gaming licensee to grant variances from provisions of the internal controls if he finds that the proposal is at least equivalent to the relevant provision in the regulations, or that it's likely to achieve the same outcome. So that is the standard that would be applied by the executive director when determining whether to grant or disallow a request for a variance. And there are a number of standards you could apply. You could apply a good cause standard, or go about it in a number of different ways. But we put in this one here, and that's what we landed on.
It seems to me that this, and I know you're going to get to the exception provision, the one that's out of bounds that you can't get an exception for, but it seems to me that this one is about as tight a standard as you can possibly have, because it allows a variance only if you find that it's at least the equivalent of the standard that you're seeking a variance from, or it's likely to achieve the same outcome as the standard that you're seeking a variance from. That's a very tight standard that allows actually for very little discretion. And it seems to me that it's unlikely that there are going to be variances requested from or granted for major policy issues, as opposed to how many doors you have to go through to get into the count room. And with that in mind, a tight standard like this, it seems to me, is about. It's not about. It's the most appropriate standard to have here. So I'm in favor of it. I think it's a good standard. I understand the good cause requirement and the other things, but they seem to me, at least, to allow more discretion than this one does. And the less discretion here, it seems to me, the better.
You talked about no variance from provisions of 13840 and 13847. I know we'll get to those, but what are those referring to?
Those are the credit regulations, essentially.
Okay, so no
So that's
variance from those.
Sorry.
We essentially carve out an exception from the variance provision that says, in no case can a variance be granted from the credit provisions, meaning that what it says here is what the casino internal controls have to comply with.
What if there is advances in technology, for example, for those?
That's, I mean, that, you do limit yourself in that regard. Whether there would be advances in technology that would affect our credit regulations, I don't know that those have a lot to do with any kind of technology. They're more processes in general and standards and kind of reviews.
But if they did, then there's nothing to prevent us from reconsidering the regulation, and what this provision does is make sure that that takes place here.
Yes.
Which is a good thing.
Fair enough.
You can't put an absolute limit on our ability to change something because we can always change the limit. So, so this is really sort of it's a statement of intent, sort of.
Well, but it's also something to ensure that the discussion goes forward transparently here, and that we're not delegating to the executive director the power to make those changes and then come and tell us what she has done.
Right. And this is essentially accommodating the Attorney General's interest, too, that she called for not permitting variances relative to the consumer protection aspects of this,
right?
Which is largely the credit.
That was their recommendation, and we found merit in that, and we incorporated it.
Oh, it's a good recommendation in this area. It's an important recommendation. Those are important provisions, and we're grateful to her for pointing those out.
On the issue of the credit regs, I'm fine. Is there any other school of thought from the other side? Are we too rigid? Is it too hard for what are, for example, Commissioner McHugh said, you know, how many doors you have to go through before you get into the count room? You know, and I'd ask Bruce and our consultants, you know, are we making it this too hard for everyday run-of-the-mill variances that would be non-controversial? Guy?
It depends on what kind of variance you're really talking about. For example, we'll use opening night for an example, but it could be any night. They're low on staff, and so they can't staff the casino maybe one person shy of what they otherwise are required to do under their control. Do they have to go to the executive director before they can offer gaming on the floor? Or can that authority be delegated a little bit lower than that? Let's assume that, you know, there's, you know, for the staff, or that, you know, there's one security guard short. There are any number of things that can happen in the course of a day that are emergent, and that would delay the operation for the sake of getting to the executive director for something that is really fairly trivial. But it would be a variance from their existing control system. So we certainly don't disagree with the standard that's imposed here, but whether there could be, whether the delegation in certain circumstances could be to a person less than the executive director who might not be available for a while.
I would agree with that as well, like in the case of a snow emergency or snowstorm where people cannot get in and they have to kind of adjust their shifts, that really could be somebody's on-site decision because they have visibility of you know, what the crowd's like, and everything else can kind of work with the property.
But can't that person on site make a phone call to the
They could.
executive director or the deputy who's
Yes, they could.
maybe in charge that week or whatever, and say this is the situation, and be able to verbally authorize that variance?
Yes.
Well, and I might also add that the regs do provide for the exception on the technology point that we were just raising. That's on page 9, number 5 on page 9. So we incorporated that thought that things change with technology, and we don't want to have businesses not be able to have the ability to use them. That'd be page 9, number 5.
You know, but I guess the discussion was more of an extraordinary circumstance,
Extraordinary or trivial.
or
yeah.
or, you know, yeah.
Well, yeah, would it be constructive to have a sentence here somewhere or other that says that the executive director may delegate such authority to the on-site senior person, whatever the word would be, and to give some limited ability for that delegation?
Chairman, yeah, and they can answer would provide, notification, to the commissioner or at some
Right.
point, so that there's documentation, someone.
Right,
Often these things happen at 3 o'clock in the morning.
right.
Rick's available.
Were there,
Always.
was there feedback from licensees on this being overly rigid?
I think as a general matter, they liked the variance provision. They didn't want to restrict it.
They didn't what?
They didn't want to restrict it. They wanted us to have the discretion to make judgment calls.
So there wasn't, nobody else raised the concern that I'm raising. So, Lance, do you have any?
I certainly would agree with what I'm hearing, that if there were a circumstance at 3 a.m., and though I love Rick, I certainly would dial him up at 3 a.m. for approval. So if there was the ability to delegate authority to the highest ranking person on property, that would be very helpful.
I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. I'm someone who is very accustomed to a 3 a.m. phone call, so
Then call Commissioner Cameron.
well, so I'm just saying, it's a real responsibility in my mind.
I shouldn't
And,
make fun of this.
I don't know who the highest ranking person we'd have, and I don't think it's an imposition to receive a phone call for something, we would.
And I'm not sure, as we look at that the regulations themselves are that restrictive, and that the policies that the licensees can supply us can handle some of those particular exceptions. Because, for instance, it's just on the staffing side, the language is each gaming licensee shall at all times maintain a level of staffing that ensures the proper operation and effective supervision of authorized games. So I think we may have situations we may have to deal with that aren't covered specifically in the internal controls, but I think we're better off to take a look at those as they come up rather than have some kind of a carte blanche decision at this point. Because as we approve the internal controls, we can keep that situation in mind and make sure that we're approving internal controls that have some flexibility within them.
Yeah, I guess the personnel issues that we've just been talking about aren't included in, the hypotheticals we've been using aren't included in the internal
And
controls
I think that's the case in
section. That's what you
several
mean.
areas, that
Right.
we're not quite as restrictive as we think.
Right.
Well, that was just an example. I mean, there's services, suppose I don't want to belabor this, but so that there's a drop schedule, for example. I believe that is an internal control. You have to have a schedule for the drop. And they can't do it at the time that it was scheduled for. I mean, they do it a half hour later. Does Rick have to get woken up at 3 in the morning for that?
I've said mine. I mean, what this says is the executive director. So if you can't reach him, you can't do it. It doesn't say the interim director or whoever's taking over on vacation. So at the moment, it's the executive director. We could say, or his designee, and give the executive director the ability to delegate if and as he or she, in this case he, thinks it's appropriate. That could be to Karen when he's on vacation. It could be in a snowstorm to somebody on site. I mean, I don't know.
I'll go along with that.
Well, perhaps we ought to think it through, because if you did that, it's one thing to take care of these examples that we're hearing about, to say that you have a lesser standard for some variance that doesn't last for more than, say, 8 hours or 12 hours.
One time or something.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. So
but until you can, so the drop for half an hour, somebody else can do it, but that variance only stays in place for a maximum of 8 hours, and then you figure out why they asked for it. So, but there's a couple of ways to do that, but I think we ought to think that through rather than change it on the fly. Can we do that? I mean, or do we have to approve these today?
No, you certainly don't have to approve them today. Maybe we should kind of see how many changes we have to make
Right.
and come back to this.
Yeah,
If there's
right.
nothing else, we might be able to resolve it today. If we have a whole litany of things,
Yeah,
we might need
okay.
to come back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I don't think, yeah, okay.
In conclusion there, a report would have to accompany any variances that the executive director approved, so you could see, generally speaking, what the variances were. Moving on, page 15, on the bottom, I just point out, there are a couple of places where we deleted entire sections, and by and large, we did that for one primary reason, and that is that we decided that the regs that we had here at one time were better positioned in another section of the regulations. In this case, the floor plan regulations were moved to the certificate of operations section. In some other places, we moved some slot regulations. We took them out because we already have slot regulations that govern the specific subject matter. So that's why you'll see a couple of instances where we deleted sections from the internal controls in their entirety. And we can go through those individually if that would be helpful, but that's why we did that.
Sounds good.
Next page is page 18. This is the records retention section. And you'll see here we added in two things. First of all, that the officials from the Attorney General's office will have to be notified and approve of destruction of certain records. The second thing we did was we extended the time in which the casinos had to request that the documents be destructed from 15 days to 60 days. The theory being that in the event that there's an investigation ongoing, that the Office of the Attorney General may need more lead time to know whether a certain document would be required or not. That's where these changes came from.
Right.
But you said certain records, the regulation says any record.
Any records. Well, any records covered by the regulations, which is pretty much all the records.
It doesn't say any record covered by the regulations. I take Commissioner Zuniga's point. It's any record.
Any record, yeah. So they could be getting notified all the time. Not just us, but the Attorney General's office.
Well, I mean, the way I understand it, there are only certain records that the casino has to retain. There are certain that they don't. We don't have, for example, I don't think a requirement that they keep coat check records for any period of time. That was one of the things that came up early on when we streamlined what records needed to be retained. And you'll recall we moved over and adopted the state records retention schedule in many respects, and a lot of it has to do with law enforcement and or financial type records. So when we say records, and if we need to clarify, we can, it was intended to be records that this schedule requires you to retain. Not,
How about just saying any record described in these regulations? And
Yep.
that would-
we can do that.
That would remove that ambiguity and let them burn up the coat check records.
Okay. Okay. The next page is page 24. This gets into alcoholic beverage control. So this works in conjunction with our alcoholic beverage control regulations that you've seen previously and are now going through a comment period. But it was important to capture that their alcoholic beverage control policy has to be submitted as part of the internal controls. And we point out a couple of things that have to be in their policy, including proper training of employees, not serving underage or visibly intoxicated individuals, and ensuring that visibly intoxicated or impaired patrons are not permitted to gamble, essentially. We also, in the next section, 13, which is up on the screen there, add into their complementary service regulations provisions that mirror what we discussed as part of the alcoholic beverage control regulations and the service of so-called free alcoholic beverages and when something is free and when it's not. And we say in here that if the casino intends, as I would anticipate that they all will, to allow payment for alcoholic beverages by way of rewards, points, or the like, that they detail in their internal controls how that process will work and how they will keep records documenting those transactions. So that's what is included in here. We're now up to page 32. This provision just basically says in the count room, if it's going to be wired, that they have to post a sign notifying people that the room is subject to monitoring. On the next page,
Let me ask a question about that. I saw this. Are the Eyes in the Sky going to be equipped with audio?
Just at the, in the soft count room.
Just in the soft count?
Yes.
Okay. And that's an industry standard too?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
On the next page, page 33, I would just point out that you'll see a lot of strike-throughs in the sections that follow here. And the reason for that is that we consolidated the term slot cash storage boxes, slot drop buckets, and slot drop boxes into one term, which we now refer to as slot drop containers. They're all basically the same thing. We created a definition at the beginning of the regs where we clarified that point. So you'll see a lot of strike-throughs and whatnot, and that's the reason that was done. The next page, 34, we talk about the possession of firearms. And here we clarified the process that would be undertaken in the event that someone shows up at the casino possessing a firearm. And what we say here is that the gaming licensee shall immediately notify an official in the on-site office of the IEB, who shall then be removed from the gaming establishment by officers assigned to the gaming enforcement unit. So a state police trooper would do the removal. They would then make the gaming licensee would then notify the AG's office within 48 hours, that the policy had been violated and this is what happened. So that's the process we set forth here. That was in consultation with the Attorney General's office.
And then is it clear who's responsible for following up on that thereafter? Let's assume that the person with the firearm didn't have a license.
Sorry.
Well, I could comment, if that is in fact the case in the office, the members of the gaming enforcement unit, whether it's Plainville PD or the state police, they could take corrective action then as far as whether an arrest or a summons or whatever was necessary as far as initiating some kind of criminal prosecution, and then the Attorney General's office would make a determination about whether or not they would want to be the ones to prosecute the case.
Okay. The only reason I ask that is so that the lanes are clear of what happens thereafter. Okay, great.
Okay. The next section I think we'll want to touch on is on page 44 and 45. Really quickly, this is... Yes.
Before we go to that, I had a question on page 35. There's 138.21. there's a reference to 205 CMR without a number. Is that an upcoming?
Yes, those are in draft form. I'm not sure the precise status. They've been before you before, whether they're going through the process formally or not. They will be shortly.
Okay.
The reason there's no number is because the Secretary of State's office can't publish a regulation about a regulation that hasn't been promulgated yet. So that's really just a placeholder. At some point down the road, once we're done with our regulations, we're going to have to go through all of our regulations and stick in the right reference numbers. That's one of the tricks of promulgating, hundreds of pages of regulations all at once. So we'll have to go back and reconcile all these numbers.
Put that in the calendar.
And then what do we give the Secretary of State another set with all the numbers plugged in, which then goes into the mass register?
Essentially, we'll have to amend the regulations, just
I got it.
going through and saying, I think there are other changes we'll have to make at some point as well, so we'll probably have to have a whole process where we make whatever tweaks, including updating the cross-references.
Okay.
On page 44, and this is kind of the subject that won't come up for some time, but we talk about tips or gratuities. And I would just note that we did make a number of adjustments here based upon written comments we received from the UAW. And I'm happy to go through them, but they are certainly notable, especially as they apply to poker dealers. And we separated out how pools for poker dealers would operate.
Was there any of their, I think they made 3 major suggestions. Were there any that we did not agree with? It was the
there was nothing we didn't agree with. We didn't accept it. The problem is that the statute that these are based on don't recognize poker dealers as a separate entity. So what we had to do here was basically say that if the poker dealers choose to, they can separate out their tips, but they still have to go into a pool, and that they can be paid out then in the exact proportion to the amount that they were paid in. So essentially, you're getting your tips back.
Right.
As opposed to just letting poker dealers keep their tips. So they do have to go into a pool, just because of the way the statute is written. There may have been 1 or 2 other details that we didn't capture, and I don't remember.
There was the issue about a licensee may, quote, may designate a percentage of the prize pool for distribution pro rata among all dealers. We believe this percentage should be the subject of collective bargaining, and the regulation should clearly allow bargaining on this subject. Where did we come down on that?
I don't think we included that, did we?
No.
And I guess that would leave it to bargaining.
Pardon?
I don't think we included
So,
that in here.
so it would be left, because it's may, so it's, if we choose not to act on it, it would be subject to bargaining, I guess.
I think that's right.
Okay. Next.
Can I ask a question? Some of the language added since the first draft includes the distribution ban is based on time spent dealing. If a dealer is waiting, is assigned to the table but is not dealing, it's standing up there waiting for customers, like I see them sometimes. Is that time spent dealing?
They would be considered
That
dealing at
counts,
that
right?
point.
Because
Yes.
you're on the clock, you're
Yes.
ready to go. Okay.
The distinction was when if the gaming licensee were to tell a dealer that they needed to go to training or do something else that wasn't related to dealing, that they shouldn't be allowed to take from the pool at that point. They should be compensated directly by the casino. That was the theory there. Subject to bargaining, of course.
Todd and Bruce, and we're also scheduled to take, because we don't have any dealers in effect as we open, we're scheduled to come back to this topic before the casinos open as well.
Right, good.
Okay. The next page, 46, is where we get into credit and the like. So the first point is just in, it's 138.40. In paragraph 2, we clarified the third-party check language, as you can see. And as you'll recall, it was the problem gaming framework that first suggested that the use or the cashing of third-party checks by the casino should be prohibited. So that's where this originated from. We clarified that that is other than bank-issued cashier's checks or traveler's checks, but important to note here that all third-party checks would be prohibited from cashing at the casino.
What does New Jersey do, Bruce?
They prohibit third-party checks.
Next page, 47, we added in some language just to clarify.
Can I come back to that? A cashier's check payable to a third party, would that be a third-party check? I bring a cashier's check payable to General Motors, endorsed purportedly by General Motors to me. What happens to that check?
That would be considered a third party, wouldn't it?
Shouldn't be cash.
I know it shouldn't be cash.
You may be arrested. It's payable to you?
It's endorsed by General Motors to me.
Over to him.
Pay to the order of McHugh.
Well, I think what we're getting after is where the casino is the third party.
Yes.
Yeah, so I understand
Right.
that. But with the check I just described,
It would have to be a fourth party check if they were ever going to take it, right?
yeah, maybe it would be a fourth party check.
If General Motors is endorsing a cashier's check, that's a big problem.
Well, no, the problem is General Motors may not be endorsing it, right?
I see what you mean.
I don't think a cage would take that check. All right.
I think the bottom line is that people really need to go to the bank to cash these kind of checks and not go to the casino with them.
All right. Okay.
Page 47, we get into specific procedures for the issuance of the counter checks, and we added some language in there clarifying that when the markers are actually issued, that they are to include disclosures consistent with the disclosures provided at the time the extension of credit was approved, and include the date or time period within which the check will be deposited with the patron's bank. Paragraph 8, we get into, we mentioned this in a couple places, but right here, that the casino, we added in, cannot process credit card cash advances. We'll have to clarify that that's credit card cash advances, but that's what that's intended to be. So that's an issue that we certainly wanted to bring to your attention. That was based upon comments we received primarily from the Office of the Attorney General. The issue is whether you want to prohibit any credit card cash advances, and this is what it would look like in the regulations.
That confused me because I was thinking debit cards. I mean, but as long as it's clear that what we're talking about is credit card cash advances, which is altogether different, I think that was a really good suggestion from the AG.
Yeah, that where it says where that number 8 ends, where it says to process a cash advance transaction, it should clarify that it's a credit card cash advance transaction, and that's the point that Todd made. I was initially on the fence on this relative to this is credit that has already been approved by the credit card companies, and there's a convenience nature of it. But from a responsible gaming framework, if there's a transaction that constitutes the most risk, if you will, in terms of people making choices in the heat of the moment or et cetera. It's the credit card cash advances that may be the ones to limit. That doesn't necessarily mean that there will not be a bank across the street, offering that convenience, but at least there's a little bit of a break that happens between that person.
Because if they had the money, right, they would use their debit card.
Right.
Right. The worst kind of
Right.
loan to get.
Right. A lot of these suggestions, I take it, came from the Attorney General. They're very helpful, very thoughtful.
A number of them
Right.
did, yes.
Yeah.
Some of them came from MGM, not that one,
Right.
obviously, but
Right.
some.
No, I mean, I'm specifically focusing on a lot of these credit and other regulations.
Did we, it's probably right in front of me, but did we decide that you cannot use your credit card to buy chips?
So that's number 10.
Okay, sorry.
Where we
Oh, I
say
see.
that.
Yeah, right, okay.
A lot of credit cards won't let you do that anyway, but here we say you can't do it. And most casinos don't do that, as I understand it, anyway.
Is that right? Bob and Guy, is that right? Bob? Is it-
Yeah, that's,
Is it customary that casinos typically don't let you buy chips with a credit card?
Yes, for the first few credit card transactions, although it's not typical that you can't go to an ATM and get cash.
Right, right.
That
As long
was-
as it's not a cash advance on a credit card, that's where we've prohibited those. You can get a debit card, but you can't,
Even on a credit card, you
But
can
we're-
get a cash advance on a credit card in most casinos.
right, but we're prohibiting that.
You're prohibiting that.
Right.
yeah, one of the initial hurdles of online gaming where they allowed them, New Jersey and Nevada, was the fact that many credit card companies will not even let you use the credit card for that transaction.
Right. Let me go back to number 9, the 15 feet. We got the 15 feet quite arbitrarily way back before the Division of Banks had made a ruling on whether they could be anywhere. Now they can be in the gaming establishment, not in the gaming area. The 15 feet has stayed there.
It was originally 100 feet.
We had 100
and,
feet?
Yeah,
Oh.
and I had kind of mentioned looking at Penn's plan, that would put the ATM out in the parking lot somewhere. So that's why it was short.
So I'm just wondering whether, I know some people, and particularly Senator Rosenberg, I know when this debate was going on about the ATMs altogether, and he was being protective of the right to have ATMs within the gaming establishment, but acknowledging the issue here. And I'm just wondering whether is 15 feet the right arbitrary number? It could be 15 feet, no less than 15 feet, and out of the line of sight from the gaming area. So at least it's around a corner or something. So the theory is, you know what the theory is. The theory is to create some kind of cooling off period, break in play. But I'm totally mindful of, we're not trying not to make life miserable for the 80 to 90% of the people who are fine, but what does everybody think about
Well,
that?
I think we should, and we are, looking at all of these a little bit holistically. If we were accepting credit card cash advances, maybe there would be a bigger business case to think about that 15 feet. But we are not. And we are also, there's a number of other provisions and enhancements that have happened as a result of all of these comments and discussions with the Attorney General and others, credit extension, et cetera, that I think complement and supplement this notion of the ATMs and proximity. So I'm very comfortable with the 15 feet because it doesn't work in isolation. It works with all these other measures that we've taken to balance between the convenience and the protections.
And I was wondering if we could, since it is an arbitrary number, we could make it a little I understand 100 would be prohibitive, but could it be somewhere in between? And I realize Penn is a small facility, but even if that meant walking into one of the restaurants or something, as opposed to, just a little bit longer walk, certainly not to the parking lot. Just was thinking maybe it could be somewhere in between, so you really do have to walk, 25 feet, I don't know.
Any other thoughts, either, any commissioner? Commissioner McHugh, you got an opinion?
No, I don't.
You're all right with 15, I guess.
15 has been there. I don't think it's drawn a particular amount of comment. It has drawn some, but we're by definition talking about arbitrary numbers. So if this proves to be a problem, we can change it. I think that's one of the benefits of gathering data, finding out what's happening, and this is a good start. And we do have provisions for keeping extensive records of what's happening in these casinos, and so I think, and that's could be one of the variables that's used in the study of the game sense.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of opportunities to figure out if this is the right number or not.
But
and I'd leave it where it is for the moment.
Is changing it after the fact a little more difficult, though, taking a machine away and moving it? I just don't know if that's a little more difficult.
I don't think moving it 10 feet or 15 feet or 20 feet is a big deal.
Well, if they built a kiosk around it and...
Got a wire.
Oh, I see what you mean. Oh.
Yeah.
Commissioner Stebbins?
Well, we had put this one specific issue out for comment for a great period of time, even before we got to the drafting and the internal control regs, if I'm not mistaken. And
we did get a lot of comments on this, both sides. Some people said, put it on a different floor, put it out of the building, or, where it is fine. I mean, they were all over the board, the comments. I don't think there was any rhyme or reason to those.
I find Commissioner Zuniga's point. We are pretty rigid, strict about a lot of other aspects, and maybe taken together, the totality of that is makes the point.
Reasonable.
Yeah. I brought it up. I'm okay with sticking with it.
I am, as I said. The whole point is to encourage a break. I mean, there's places where the ATMs are on the casino floor. So, we've gone, outside of the casino floor, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out really paragraph 11 and then going back to paragraph 3 here in the section. These both talk about ID and other controls relative to the acceptance of cash. And there was a comment made by the Office of the Attorney General relative to anti-money laundering provisions and the like. And I thought it would just be helpful to point out that we do have a number of provisions in here that address those issues. We didn't flush them out any further because, as we understand it anyway, the Bank Secrecy Act, which is federal law, of course, and associated anti-money laundering statutes and regulations under federal law impose a number of requirements on all casinos which have been deemed financial institutions under the Act to engage in a number of practices, including the filing of currency transaction reports, of course, for transactions of $10,000 coming or going into the casino in cash, and for suspicious activity reports to be filed by the casino when $5,000 or aggregate $5,000 movements of money or behavior are detected by the casinos. I believe casinos are required to appoint an anti-money laundering officer under federal law. And there are all kinds of other particulars along those lines that the federal government has imposed upon casinos. So I just wanted to make clear that all of the licensees are under obligations under federal law to implement anti-money laundering procedures. We chose, for that reason, not to flush it out any further. We could certainly revisit that if we decided that we wanted to be more actively involved in that process.
So what do we say about anti-money laundering in these regulations?
Well, we say it just in paragraph, there are a couple of places where, throughout, where we require the casinos to verify identities and things like that, and that gets into anti-money laundering procedures. But specifically in paragraph 3, we say that they have to have ID requirements at the time that patron deposits funds, including controls in place to ensure that any cash received on deposit is done so in accordance with required currency and transaction reporting and anti-money laundering criteria. We, in paragraph 11, then we get into procedures, including a log verifying and accounting for wire transfers and electronic fund transfers. So all of these will be part of the internal controls. They'll also be part of the Bank Secrecy Act requirements. So it seems to me that there are a number of places where this issue is addressed. And as I said, at some point or now, if it would be helpful, we could try to flush it out even further.
So you're suggesting somewhere in regs, just making reference for our licensee to follow federal requirements like the Bank?
Well, I'm suggesting it's already covered. We don't have to tell them to
Right.
follow federal law. We can if that provides a level of comfort.
Well, the Attorney General recommends record keeping, which we mandate, that's a change, recommends that it be part of the training program of casino employees and I believe of our employees, and I believe that is happening, that will be happening. She also suggests that in addition to the reporting required by the Bank Secrecy Act, that we require, I guess she means the same reports to the Commission and to the AGO. Is that a good idea? Is that sort of stumbling into somebody else's line of work?
Yeah, that's, if they're gonna provide notice to you, it wouldn't be any real problem to provide also to the AGU unit. I might add, just as a practical matter, FinCEN and the IRS do drop in and want to see the reports periodically, often unannounced, and they'll review suspicious activity reports and CTRs. That's aside from what you might get investigation. So the operators all know that. They know that they have to keep it available, and copies can be made electronically and filed with the commission. Candidly, wouldn't refer to all that much, but there are times when we may have to for investigation. IUB may have something that they may want to look at. We get a request from another agency.
Okay.
But
So
all
there's-
that is kept there. The operators know it, or understand that obligation.
So by requiring reporting to us and to the AGO as well, that's not doing anything about getting in somebody else's lane. That's not,
No.
wouldn't be considered disruptive in any way. Well, then in that case, that seems to be something that we could add, that she recommended.
And just for informational purposes, Bank Secrecy Act and money laundering is a condition of the license as well.
Right, and we're going further than that. We're saying that the reporting that is required under that act be copied to us and to the AG. It's an additional step. But I
Well,
think,
as long as we're discussing this topic, the American Gaming Association has created a set of recommended anti-money laundering procedures, right? They just did that a while ago. Where do they fit in? Do they go in regulations? Are they best practices for casinos? Are they things that are, it can't be things that are required by the Code of Federal Regulations. What is the role of them?
The AGA? Or the recommendation?
The recommendations. Where would they go?
I think I have it right here. I think they're best practices. They
Right.
say it right in there. It's a guideline for the casinos.
And where do you say that?
It's a long document. I
It's
have
the
to
AGA's
find it, but it was issued by the AGA in December. I think that's what
No,
you're
that's
referring
right.
to,
That's what I'm talking about. But is it in these regulations?
Oh, no, it's not in here.
Or referenced in these
It's
regulations?
not referenced.
Well, I guess my question was imprecise. recommendations like that on the money laundering front, which are extensive and comprehensive and obviously thoughtful, are they just things that people are expected to do? Are they things that should find their way into regulations? Are they things that should be?
They're generally, I mean, they're recommended standards, so I mean, the best spot for them would be in internal controls.
In our regs.
Yeah. If we were going to adopt those standards, kind of like we do with gaming machines and the gaming machine standards, we've adopted those, many of those in regulations, we'd also
So
adopt
the
them.
question is,
my guess-
are those best practices adopted as a practical matter in our regs? Or
My-
are there
Or they
best
left-
practices that we ought to have adapted from AGA into our regs as well?
Or are they left to the internal controls for each of the casinos to determine which of them they think are appropriate for their kind of operation, to tailor them to their operations that way, so that we would expect, when we see the internal controls, to see an outline of their anti-money laundering approaches.
They definitely, each licensee could, and that's part of what American Gaming Standards, that's what it's all about, is for licensees, for the industry itself.
To put in their
To
system
put in
of
there,
internal
so they could
controls.
actually, when they submit their internal, because that's what we lose track of, is what we're asking for is a licensee, that this is our standard from the commission, we're saying, send in your policies that at least comply with this level of internal control.
All right.
So
And
they
where-
could choose to include any kind of standards in those policies that they send forward and submit them to us.
All right, now where do we say, in just in general terms, that your internal controls have to include your anti-money laundering and Bank Secrecy Act approaches?
No, other than what we say in paragraph 3 and 11.
Okay, should they?
We can.
Just say that. I'm not talking about now, I understand. I'm not talking about spelling out a whole list of procedures, but just your system of internal controls should show us what your anti-money laundering and Bank Secrecy Act compliance procedures are.
We can certainly clarify that, yes.
Yeah,
mean,
I know we
think that-
can. Is it a good idea to do that?
Oh, that, I don't know, is that a good idea?
I think it's something they have to do anyway for the federal government, so I don't know if that would really be beneficial to add into our regulations.
Just because it's going to already happen, but there's no downside to doing it if we want to.
Just like it says, just like we would say, you have to comply with federal law.
Oh, Mr. Michael, do you have a thought on that?
Well, only that I can't speak for the AGA. My guess is that the last thing they wanted to do is to make more regulations.
Yeah, no, I'm by the regulation piece. I get that.
But as terms of best practice, I think, yes, that it would be something that would be encouraged, that the casinos follow the best practice. And this is recommended by their lobbying group. But anything more than just to review their internal controls to see if they comply with your regulations, and if they adequately create processes that are compliant with the Bank Secrecy Act, that would be sufficient.
Okay. When the feds come and look at them, they're going to be looking for their anti-money laundering bank secrecy controls, right? And that's already going to be done, so if we see them in their controls, that's fine. And we undoubtedly will, because they're in serious...
They have to do it.
Taking a serious risk if they don't have them.
Right. Yep.
Sorry. Well, okay, that was a long detour, but...
What about the issue of having us be copied, us and the AG be copied on bank secrecy filings?
Oh, I think
Bank
that's a
secrecy
good idea.
reports.
I do too.
We should
Yeah.
add that.
Right.
You just want, I assume, the CTRs and the SARs, or do you want all 5? I don't know.
Well,
if they're
I
all-
was trying to take it from the AG's letter, and I'm not exactly sure what she's referring to, but it sounds like what she's referring to is the reports of suspicious transactions and so forth, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fair...
Right.
And it's a report that's being created anyway, so we should take a look at it.
Okay. page 49. Now we are getting into the establishment of the patron credit accounts and the standard that are applied when the casino is evaluating whether to extend credit to an applicant or not. Of course, we've received a lot of comment on these provisions here. I would submit that paragraphs A and B under 138.43 really set out the standard that's to be applied. We say that the casino has to, prior to issuing credit to a patron, evaluate the creditworthiness of the patron. It has established in a commercially reasonable manner in the context of their ability to repay the amount of the credit requested or to be extended. As you'll see, we included and added the term commercially reasonable manner, as we did in a number of places throughout here, just to fortify the standard that the casinos should use when determining whether to extend credit and other like activities, other associated activities. And then the second part of it is that credit should not be extended to an individual in an amount beyond which the information reviewed demonstrates that they have a reasonable ability to repay. We did receive the Attorney General's letter, talks about this ability to repay standard as well. We left it here. It appears generally that this is A and B set out a clear standard for both the casino to understand and for us to understand in enforcing it. And that's why we elected to leave it as it reads.
Well, the letter, and I mentioned this to you before, the letter talked about in 1A their ability to repay the amount of the credit requested or to be extended in accordance with the terms of the credit extension. And I don't see why we can't add those words. That's what the letter, as I read it, suggested we do, and it seems to me that it may be implicit, but it seems to me to do no harm and to make it clearer. In other words, if there's a repayment obligation of $1,000 a month, the question is not whether the person can repay for 6 months, and the question is whether the person can repay $6,000 at some point, but whether the person can repay $1,000 a month.
Isn't this the question of casino credit not being real credit? You know, the whole marker and what happens to the marker, and it's substituted once you win and after you leave, etc.
But those are part of the terms of the credit extension. I don't see how it's not a credit extension, but I don't want to fight that fight.
Yep.
But somebody has got to repay the amount advanced at some point. And it seems to me that the Attorney General's letter says that if it says you have to repay before you leave the casino, hypothetically, that the credit analysis ought to make sure you have the ability to do that, as opposed to you got to repay within 30 days. And
all you're doing is saying, make sure that it's in the terms of the credit extension itself.
Just if you look at A, and it says credit, third line, credit requested or to be extended in accordance with the, I would add, in accordance with the terms of the credit extension.
Yeah, I don't see anything controversial about that.
I don't either. I think it makes sense. It just clarifies it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll add that.
Sounds like a go.
And then C, I think it's just important to point out, this is where we have the $10,000 minimum threshold, which we'll come back to in a moment, but I think that's an important component to the credit extension regulations. The next section, page 51, that we should discuss. In the middle of the page, This is the verification section. This goes through all the elements that need to be verified on a patron's application before credit can be extended. And we just added in language, again, that the verification process has to be performed in a commercially reasonable manner, and that the process has to be documented in the patron file. And as we flip over to the next page, the reason...
Page are we on now?
52. This goes through a little more of the particulars as to how the verification of these elements is performed. There are 4 things essentially that have to be verified. It's the patron's residence, their casino credit limits, which is essentially central credit, their patron's outstanding indebtedness, which is verified via 2 ways, but primarily with the consumer credit check. And 4th, a patron's checking account information is supposed to be verified. So these are the 4 areas that have to be verified. With the latter 3, we basically say that the casino has to use commercially reasonable methods to attempt to verify it. We go through some of the ways that they need to do this. In the event that they're unable to, for whatever reason, if the person is lives out of the country and doesn't have a consumer credit report, that would be indicated in the patron credit file, and that would be considered, the verification requirement would be deemed satisfied. Of course, if certain information isn't in existence, that doesn't alleviate the necessity that the gaming licensee find that the person has an ability to repay the amount and what have you. So they still have to make that, get to that point, but if they're unable to verify certain information, we say that that will be okay in certain circumstances.
Anybody?
So there would be other ways to verify?
You can verify certain pieces of information if other pieces aren't available and still get to the finding you need to make.
Is there, it looks to me like we have pretty well agreed with and accommodated virtually everything that the Attorney General raised. Is there, at this stage of the game, is there anything major where we had a really substantive disagreement, or where we have not?
Substantive disagreement. Well, we can go to page 57. I don't know if you'd call it a substantive disagreement, but
I guess.
this, page 57, we added in language that discusses the gaming licensee's obligation to maintain certain data relative to the extension of credit and the issuance of markers and the collection of the markers. And I think we essentially agreed on the metrics that in the...
Can I interrupt for a second? Amy, that's not the... Were you looking for page 57 up there?
Section 4.
There it is.
There it is.
There it is.
Yeah.
Good, thanks. Okay, go ahead, sir.
The language we added in here would require the gaming licensees to maintain this data and have it accessible in the event that the commission, its designee, or the Office of the Attorney General want to go look at it. But that it wouldn't require an annual report be submitted to us for review in that manner. So that is an area where we didn't adopt the exact recommendation made by the Attorney General's office.
So what was the recommendation? That an annual report be filed?
That's right.
And in this case, you know, if it's filed by as a matter of course, it can become a public record, and there may be information here that we may not want, or might put some of these licensees under a competitive disadvantage.
Right.
But it's available to anybody, any agency that wants to check it. It's
Available, yes. Submitted as a matter of course, different story.
Right,
Right.
okay.
Well, actually, I would, I was going to ask as to why, and deliberate as to why we would need that to be further than this commission or its designee. But I suppose, you know, the Attorney General has access to a subpoena power, just like us.
Who would our designees be?
Probably Mr. Band, maybe Mr. Vanderlinden, people along those lines. Mr. Kane.
Our auditors, consultants.
Yeah.
So it's internal to the commission for the most part.
That's how I would envision this, sure.
Yeah, my preference would be to keep it with the commission or its designee.
Well, the Attorney General is constantly doing studies about consumer credit practices and tailoring regulations to problems that the Consumer Protection Division sees in consumer credit transactions. And I think there's a legitimate need legitimate desire to find out information about that. I'm sure they get similar information from banks about what they're doing, where they're doing it, where they're extending it, what terms they're using, what kinds of, how many of these things bounce, how many collection efforts they have to achieve, and that kind of study is not necessarily going to lead to enforcement of some regulation against the casino, but it may add to the body of knowledge against which they make further regulations. It seems to me there is a legitimate need for that.
I don't know that they do get that from banks necessarily. I mean, the Division of Banks might.
Well, maybe they don't get it from banks, but they maybe get it from health clubs. I'm confident that they are constantly engaged in gathering this kind of data for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me it's at worst harmless, I think, and this is an area, the consumer protection in general is an important Attorney General priority. This particular Attorney General has focused on this particular aspect of consumer protection. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have it be available to her. I mean, you know, we all want to, you know, as we begin to work out these lanes, as you say, we don't want to be stumbling over each other, and we don't want two agencies coming in and asking for the same data, or two agencies competing with one another, anything like that. Those are issues that I think are important to be squared away. Who has accountability for what, when is an important issue. But in general, to have information like this available to the Attorney General upon reasonable request seems entirely appropriate. And as I say, at absolute worst, harmless.
Yeah, I guess I would have rather us be that conduit, but maybe it's just a minor point.
Well, it's upon request, so it's not something that will, they'll be required to keep it, and we each have a role in regulating, so I don't see an issue either.
Okay.
Okay, just two more things and then I'll stop.
Oh no, this is fun.
Okay. Page 61. This, let's see, it's right towards the middle of the page, the bottom middle, right there. This talks about the gaming licensees being prohibited from selling or pledging as collateral any debt owed to the gaming licensee as a result of a gaming loss. And then we modified it with exceptions to that based upon a comment made by MGM. And it was just important to point this out, we thought, in that this is one way in which the casinos have a skin in the game, so to speak, and will help ensure sound credit extension practices to the extent that there was any concern about those. And to that end, there are really three things that I think are important in summing this whole credit section up relative to ensuring that we have a robust set of regulations. One is this section. I think this is an important section, and we're thankful that the AG pointed this issue out to us. The second is that $10,000 minimum threshold for the issuance of credit. I think that is helpful as well. And the third thing, which is not in these regs, but that's important to bear in mind here, is that under the taxation law, in the gross gaming revenue calculation, the moment the chips are played, if you will, or the money is placed into the slot machine, it counts towards the calculation of gross gaming revenue. The casinos are not allowed to offset the money if it's played on credit. So what that means essentially is if someone plays $10,000, that is taxable. So $4,900 comes to the Commonwealth, and then the casino has to go collect it. So they have every incentive right there to ensure that they engage in responsible credit extension practices, because they're paying taxes on the money whether they collect it or not. So those three things, I think, are important components to bear in mind when you look holistically at our credit extension regulations, which I think are really robust and hopefully workable for everybody as well.
I think that's a really important point to make.
The last thing, and then I will wrap it up, is on page 63. That's the ATM section. You've already talked about most of these issues. This is where the 15-foot rule, again, is located. It clarifies that there are no cash advance transactions. And finally, it prohibits the gaming licensee from essentially engaging in data mining from the ATM. And that was based upon a comment as well. So that's where that's included. And with that,
I was unaware that could be done at all. I gather it can be.
It apparently can be done. They can tell who, took money out and how much they took it out. How much
I know they can't, but I was unaware that they did. I would urge the Attorney General to look at that.
I don't know if any of our
I don't know.
licensees do, but as
You know, those
We're
privacy,
essentially saying they can't
those
do it.
privacy notices that sometimes the credit card companies send you when they change, they're notifying you whether they sell your data or not.
The 60 pages that are.
The 60 pages, I know what it
That's
is.
47 pages down, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, we've heard about this before, that this does happen, and
Right.
I don't want it happening.
Right.
with that, I think we'll rest.
Well, I think this, we joke about whether this is fun or not. This is really, really important, and I think that this is a very thoughtful, highly detailed, comprehensive job on a sometimes numbing in detail topic, but it's critical for the sound operation of these casinos and the interactive process and the cooperation and thoughtful comments we've gotten from not only the Attorney General, but the public and the licensees has been an enormous help to get through this piece. And I think we've got a good set of regulations here.
Agreed.
There was, I guess that, I'm sorry, there was that one last issue that we were going to come back to. I can't even remember what it was.
Which is
but
the
I know
variance.
it was-
It's the
Oh,
variance
variance.
question.
Right.
I think the sense of the group was that we would like to see some kind of an extreme opportunity, whether it is in the discretion of the ED to delegate his authority under certain circumstances. That's maybe the easiest way to do it, but it seemed to me that there was at least a mild consensus that some such flexibility would make sense.
And perhaps cabined by a length of time for emergencies.
Yes.
But I don't know, I'm not sure of that. I would like to see what we come up with.
Yeah, I would like to see it as well.
I think it's important, and I'd like to see it, even at the risk of delaying this slightly.
Okay? Not now.
No.
Down, boy, down.
Should we, so bring this back at your next meeting?
Yeah, see what you come up with,
Yeah.
or send us around some options, or
Okay.
visit us or whatever.
Okay.
Right.
So we don't need a vote as yet.
Right.
No.
All right, well,
Is that
that was
gonna-
it.
is that
Well,
go-
well, I think we're coming down to the wire here to get these enacted final for Penn, so,
Is it 2-week delay?
We've
Kill
had-
that, or what's the
they're in the
schedule?
process of submitting their internal controls at this point. And
Well, everything would be the way it is here, except for this one section about variances.
Right.
So they could rest assured that this is what they're gonna see.
With the minor changes that we've made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that we discussed here today. But
Right.
this, what comes out of what we've discussed today, the only open item is the variance piece.
so
And
we would come back with the changes that were discussed today and the variance piece.
Yes, but the change, apart from the variance piece, we know what the changes are. They're minor.
And for purposes of Penn.
For purposes of
Penn
Penn,
knows,
they can
right.
count on nothing else changing from our discussion today except the variance piece.
and the variance piece is a narrow one. You know, there will be
Yeah,
a
very
process for
narrow,
Which
variances.
makes it, and it'll be less rigorous than it is now. So
It
that's-
might be less rigorous than the way it's written.
Yeah, but it really doesn't affect their, well, maybe it does, but
It's a small piece of
a
it.
small piece of their internal
Mr. George,
control.
is that okay? Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have Attorney Lilios and Assistant Director Band on the
Oh,
gaming
great work.
regulations.
Thank you.
Great work.
Nice job, folks. Thank you.
And that, we're looking to begin the formal process for formal comment on those. And I believe that you've had an opportunity to review those in your packet.
I'm still stuck on the sick bow shaker.
So before you is Regulation 205 CMR 146 on gaming equipment. It's already been through the informal process. We have received some informal comments from the two Category 1 licensees, and we did solicit some comment through discussions from some equipment manufacturers. So this reg, as it appears now, focuses on equipment for table games. It's divided into various sections that set forth specifications for physical characteristics and handling of equipment, including, for instance, inventory procedures. There's also a section on commission, inspection, and approval of gaming equipment. And the framework presented sets out standards for uniformity to ensure game protection and overall integrity of table games at each of the Category 1 properties.
I have a general comment or a fundamental comment in light of the comments from MGM. And it has a two-part comment. We may have discussed this last time we started the informal process, but if we're 2 years away from table games, why is this now necessary? And in the context of the letter from MGM, where they point out that there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of prescription, and some of these games may change, etc. Is there an alternative to worthy of exploring in this sort of fundamental way?
I may let Mr. Day address the first question. As for the second question, this is not a red line version of what you saw before because it was so unreadable to put before you in a red line version. But we have exercised greater balance with that prescriptive formula, and in fact, we have cut maybe 20% of the pages at a minimum. And still feel confident about the level of uniformity and standardization that's in here. So we did take those comments from MGM to heart and took pen to
Okay.
paper, so to speak, on
Okay,
that
so the
particular
letter
comment.
then, it reflects comments from an earlier version that is not necessarily reflected here.
Correct.
Okay.
Originally, the reason that we had addressed this is it had sections on the slot machines in there, and that's why we put it forth. We have since moved that over to the slot regulations itself. So,
Well, maybe that may be the answer, but did you want to add to that on answer?
No, I think Bruce just hit on the answer. We had a couple sections in it applied, so we had already added up. Thought we should just as well go ahead and move it forward in the process.
Maybe it would be better actually to sit on it a while. I mean, why go through this? This is a question, not a rhetorical question. Why go through the process of getting them approved by the Secretary of State and locked in stone years before we need them? Maybe we ought to just let them sit.
could I add another recommendation?
Sure.
That we kind of do it in conjunction with the rules of the game, because they kind of go hand in hand. There's a lot of references from one to the other. Some of the requests are really addressed in the rules of the games, not here, that the various licensees made. So maybe that would be the better time to move them both forward at the same
And
time.
we have not yet seen the rules of the games, right?
I have them, but they haven't come before
Right.
you yet.
Right. Well, I would be in favor of that, because some of the comments from Wynn start to get into perhaps just what you're talking about, Bruce,
Yes.
in terms of that they may be addressed in the rules of the game.
Yes.
And there's perhaps a second reason to sit on them for a little bit.
I think right now we've got fall targeted for the rules of the game. So.
All right.
That seems.
Seems fine to me.
So we'll just hold these for a while.
Maybe that's shortening our schedule now.
Yeah.
Any other matters, any other comments on those regulations? You're all set?
One last, no, this is for
Oh, yes.
Director Wells. The one thing we didn't discuss from the Attorney General's letter was the trafficking issue, and I know there was talk about making sure that there be training in those issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And as the commission knows, Assistant Director Band has put together an intensive training for gaming agents and members of the Gaming Enforcement Unit, including Plainville PD and State Police.
Thank you.
And we've had discussion with the Attorney General's office about them participating in that training. I expect that will be part of the training over the next 3 weeks, or the 3 weeks starting on May 11th.
Training in both drug and human trafficking.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I will comment that the commanding officer of the Gaming Enforcement Unit is an expert in narcotics trafficking investigations, so we have in-house expertise on that as well. So I'm very confident in that.
Yeah, I think it's important, in particular with gaming agents who may not be as familiar, to have that training.
Yes.
So I think
And
it's,
does the training of the employees include sensitivity to money laundering, drug trafficking?
For our employees?
No, for the
Casino employees?
Casino employees.
I would assume that would be a question that Lance would really have to answer for sure.
I see a nodding head. Yeah. So the Attorney General's suggestion is appropriate, and people are on top of that, it sounds like. And we're going to share the experience with them, so they'll have an insight as
Right.
to how thorough it is or not.
Correct.
Great, thanks for bringing that up.
Okay. I have two other brief matters on the agenda. The first one, I have Mr. George representing Penn National. There's a request for a name change. I believe that request was sent formally to General Counsel Blue, and the request is in your packet.
Not for your name change.
It's going to go to Lance Pitt. Go ahead.
I don't know that there's more to it than what you folks are reading. Simply want to clear up any confusion. I know when I call the commission, sometimes they're confused as to why it comes up as Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment. So we are asking to make this change to better realign or align with where we're located.
Hear, hear.
Aye. I got to keep this Springfield in there. Just kidding.
But this is for a name change insofar as we're concerned. There are other
The license.
agencies that have to pass on this as well, right? Secretary of State, right?
Yes, they are a Delaware company, so the first step would be in Delaware.
Right. And then the DBA appears.
Registered here, so you'd have to pass.
Right. So this is so far as we're concerned, right? Okay.
Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the.
Well, wait, just, I don't want to overly complicate things. Do we need to make it contingent on those other changes being affected? I'm sure they're going to happen.
We should say that those other changes have to be in place. You're approving it subject to those other changes and approving forms being filed.
All right. So then I would, if.
No, I'm handing off now.
I would move that the petition for a name change requested by Bluetarp Redevelopment.
No,
I mean,
Springfield.
I move that the request for a name change.
Could we go back to Mr. Stebbins?
Requested by Springfield Redevelopment be allowed in the form contained in the packet, conditioned upon the name change request being filed and approved by other appropriate regulatory authorities.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
So that's just the filing.
There you go.
And to
And
wrap, and to
Bluetarp Redevelopment is untouched by that.
And just to wrap up the agenda this morning, at our last commission meeting on March 19, 2015, the commission granted the IEB authority to grant temporary licenses for primary vendors and temporary key gaming employee licenses. And the authority, the delegated authority was conditioned on reporting by the IEB back to the commission. And I am today reporting that we issued 4 key gaming employee temporary licenses. Jeremy Howland, the VP of Finance at Penn National, Shannon Wells, VP of Human Resources, Penn National, Michael Toma, VP of Operations, Penn National, and Michelle Collins, VP of Marketing at Penn National. And we also issued 3 temporary primary vendor licenses, Aristocrat Technologies, WMS Gaming, and Bally Gaming. Each application was deemed complete by the Division of Licensing, and the petitioner had certified, and the IEBs found that after reviewing the proposed equipment delivery dates and the operational plan for the facility, that each temporary license was necessary for the operation of the gaming establishment, given their planned June 24th, 2015 opening date, and was not designed to circumvent normal licensing procedures. The IEB found in each case the license was reasonably likely to be issued upon completion of the investigation, and once those investigations are complete and the reports are done, the appropriate steps will be taken to bring it before the commission.
Were any of these folks licensed in other jurisdictions? Michelle said she was.
Yes, I'd have to. I think all 4 of the individuals were, and certainly the 3 vendors are all licensed in multiple jurisdictions.
Okay. Thank you for that update, Director.
Thank you.
You all set? Director Wells?
I think we're set.
Thank you.
Just a minute. It should go back to Commissioner Stebbins, because I only dealt with half of what Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment wanted. So I'd like to withdraw the previous motion and do it right.
Okay.
So I move that the commission approve the change of the name Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment LLC to Plainville Gaming and Redevelopment LLC, and a change of the name of the licensee's managing member, Western Mass Gaming Ventures LLC, to Massachusetts Gaming Ventures LLC, subject to appropriate filings with the Delaware authorities and with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Secretary of State.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we are finished. Any other business? in anybody's minds? Director Day?
None
All
here.
set?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.